In the most bought game of all time, on the biggest server, is the biggest minigame in all of Minecraft, hypixel skyblock. This is the best MMO that you've never heard of. But you may be asking, what is hypixel skyblock? Well, hypixel skyblock is an MMO RPG, where MMO stands for massively, because there's a lot of players, multiplayer, because you need to play with other players, and online, because you're playing online with different people on the internet. And RPG stands for role-playing game, where you're not playing yourself in real life, you're playing inside of the game. That all makes sense, but what makes hypixel skyblock different from other MMORPGs? Grinding in a video game is when you do a repeatable action to progress throughout the game. It is important that games do not have too much grinding or too little grinding in order to keep their players playing. All MMOs need grinding to keep people in the game, because if they only have like 10 hours of really good gameplay that can only be played once, then they won't be able to keep their players for much longer than 10 hours. So they need a lot of very repeatable actions to counterbalance all the non-repeatable actions in the game. So instead, MMOs make a lot of content that is very fun to do repeatedly, but which keeps people playing in the long term, but might not be as fun or as engaging as the short term, but non-repeatable things. But when I think of grinding, I think of it in two ways: co-op or multiplayer, and single player. Single player elements of the game should be able to progress multiplayer elements of the game, and vice versa, because players are not always able to or want to play with other players. But how does hypixel skyblock add up? Well, this is one of the biggest elements of change from normal MMORPGs, because hypixel skyblock has almost no non-repeatable actions or storyline quests, which means it's a very grindy game. And as for the different types of grinding, the split between multiplayer and single player elements is very large, mainly because the different elements of the game that are single player do not coincide very much with multiplayer elements of the game. But then multiplayer elements of the game don't coincide with single player elements of the game very well either. I wouldn't really say that the grindy elements are very bad, but they don't mix very well with things like mining, farming, and dungeons. Those three things don't really mix well. They all level up differently and all need different gear in order to play. But speaking of multiplayer elements, we have the community. The community or player base of a game is essential to the game itself, because without players, the game would not work. There are a couple problems that communities can cause to a game, such as cyberbullying, trolling, duping, hacking, and other things that can cause people to leave the game. And if more people leave the game than enter the game, then the game itself cannot work because it will not have enough players. On the other hand, communities can help a game because they can make other players who look at the game interested and make them play the game too, as well as influencers or YouTubers who can bring new players into the game as well. But if the community doesn't like things that the devs do, or if the devs seem to ignore the community, then people will leave because they seem that the game will not grow or get better. But now, what about the hypixel skyblock community? Now, I was gonna have a different segment here, but I realized that the best way to talk about the hypixel skyblock community is to go to the hypixel skyblock community. So I'm just gonna go into the game itself. I'm gonna go into here. Bro, I've not gone on here for such a long time. Okay, so I'm on a public lobby right now. I'm gonna see if I can try to find somebody to interview. Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna be as awkward as humanly possible. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, how would you rate the community? Okay, let's see what his response is. Okay, so I got some pretty mixed responses. Okay, so some people like it, some people don't. Okay, I'm just gonna give him 1 mil. Because that's fine. There we go. Okay, so one dude says 0, one dude said 9, one dude says 10, one dude says 8, 3.5, and 6. So the community is pretty split just by asking random people. Lots of crab mentality going on. Huh. These people think like crabs. Okay. The community thinks like crabs. I'm not exactly sure what to think about that or what even that means, but I'm pretty sure it means something. But now the real question is fun. This is one of the most subjective things in gaming. What is fun and why are games fun? MMORPGs are often very fun to play for long periods of time because of the fulfillment that players get from progressing throughout the game. When people are fulfilled in a video game, then they find it more fun to play and in turn will play the game more. But the ways that games go about this differs. Some games are very competitive, so people are fulfilled by getting better at the game and beating better players. Some games are fulfilling because of the gameplay, luck, or story elements. But some games are fun because of the fulfillment that players get from progressing and playing with other players, which is one of the main things that MMORPGs provide. For some people, it's really fun to play MMOs because you can get better gear, unlock new content, and new mechanics, and updates. And also, it's fun to progress and talk with other people about the game. Endless grind and monotony combined with periodic rewards and improvements with the people that you meet along the way is entertaining for at least some people. But how fun is hypixel skyblock? Well, I interviewed my friend to see how much fun he gets from the game. Okay, because I have not played the game recently, I brought on my friend. And he's been playing the game recently a lot. So, from a scale of 1 to 10, how is the grinding in hypixel skyblock?
Honestly, it really depends on what you're playing. If you're trying to do dungeons, it's going to be a 10. If you're doing slayers, it's also going to be a 10. So those two are going to be like the high level grinds. And there's going to be something like that's not as grindy. Maybe like skills would be like a 9 or an 8. Grinding collections is probably not as hard. Just place a minion down and you can already get to level 9. Like grinding for items or grinding for money, then it's going to be like much easier, like a 5 or 6.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the community of hypixel skyblock?
The community of skyblock is very, very divisive. So maybe like a 7 or a 6, maybe an 8 at maximum. There's going to be people who are like trying to scam you. There's people who are going to be toxic. There's people who are going to just play skyblock just to have fun with their friends. So there's really nice and very, very mean people at the same time.
How fun is the game on a scale of 1 to 10?
A 7 or an 8. Like it's the game's pretty fun, but like if you were to grind something for too long, you get really burnt out like me. I've grinded dungeons, not enough, but enough for me to get bored. You can get bored in skyblock really easy, so that's why I recommend you constantly switch things you're grinding.
What are the strengths and weaknesses of this game?
The strength of skyblock is going to be how accessible it is to the public. Minecraft is the most popular game and hypixel is the most popular multiplayer server, and skyblock henceforth is the most popular minigame of hypixel. But the weaknesses would be like the community. There's always going to be people who are going to be scamming and like just going to put like a very, very bad social stigma towards skyblock.
Now I have to address a few things. First of all, this game has almost no story aside from some dungeon lore items, so not all players will like this style of MMO. But speaking of liking it, do I like this MMO? Because while this video has shown skyblock in a mostly positive light, I honestly quit the game all the way back in April. Mainly because school took up all of my time and I started playing other games. But now I want to start playing the game again, so I can make an honest review. But then, is this title true? Well, from what I've seen, maybe. So to answer my question, is Hypixel Skyblock the best MMORPG you've never heard of? Well, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. So subscribe if you want to see that.